So I've been meaning to make this video for a long time. I talk a lot about how traveling is awesome and it's changed our kids and all the positives of traveling full time as a family. And for context, we've been traveling now for almost 3 years. But that's not the full picture. I don't think I've been honest with you guys. That's not the full picture. And it's important that I share the other side of traveling, because it's not all roses, it's not all pretty pictures, and it's not all amazing experiences that change your life. Some of the experiences we have changed our life for the worse. And that's what I want to talk about today. But this all came about because the other day, our family dog, his name's Buddy, he was a Kelpie, just died all of a sudden. He was staying with my wife's parents and just died all of a sudden. And that broke our heart because we hadn't seen Buddy in probably a year. And we always were like, oh, he'll be there when we get back, and he wasn't. But anyway, it triggered my wife and I to have a serious conversation about traveling and whether we should be doing it. And we started talking about some of the not so good things about traveling full time as a family. And that's what we want to share today. And the first thing I want to talk about is one of the worst things about traveling full time. And if I'm being brutally honest, one of the things that I dislike about it is that your life at home moves along without you. And what I mean by that is your friends will make other friends. You know, your work colleagues that you used to be really good friends with will find other people to talk to. And slowly, unless you really, really work hard to maintain them, those relationships will peter out. Don't get me wrong, you'll still have all your really good friends and obviously your family and stuff you talk to all the time. But I'm talking about people that I used to play basketball with, say, for instance. Really good friends with them when we were back in Australia, would barely talk to them maybe once every 6 months now. And that's sad. And that's obviously something you can work on, but it's the truth of this. Because what tends to happen is your life moves so quickly because you're doing a whole bunch of stuff, you're seeing a whole bunch of things, it's really fun, it's engaging, but their life doesn't. And what tends to happen is those people whose lives are moving slower, they see how much fun and everything that's happening and the positive sides of the traveling, and they just start to maybe subconsciously get a little bit jealous. I don't know what it is, but they're pushed away by that. And we found this especially when we've been back to Australia. So we've been back to Australia a few times since we've been traveling. And we found this, we'll come back and nothing has changed. Everything is the same. People who've gotten a little bit older, certain cars being swapped out, things like that. But our life has completely moved. And that change in pace, in that differential in the speed things move at, is what causes the disconnection in the friendships. I will say this though, you will make new friends. So we have made a lot of friends traveling, and that's been absolutely amazing. But my concern is that if we do ever go back to Australia, that the reverse is going to happen. All of the friends that we have made are going to peter out, I should say. I'm going to make a conscious effort to make sure that doesn't happen. But it's something you need to be aware of. And this really affected my wife, less so myself, because I was in the Navy. The same thing happened in the Navy. But my wife was really affected by this. I remember probably about 2 years ago, we were a year into traveling. She just came up to me one day in tears. And she's like, why do my friends not like me anymore? Why do my friends not talk to me anymore? And it was triggered by seeing her friends on Facebook doing something without her. You need to be aware that this is something that will happen to every single person that travels for an extended period of time. And also your children. Your children will go through the same thing. Riley, our youngest child, is affected by this a lot. He's got a really, really good friend in Australia, and he got really upset one day because they weren't talking. And I used it as a learning point, as I do with everything. And I explained to him that, well, you've got to put in effort, mate. You've got to talk to him as much as he's got to talk to you. He's probably just busy going about his life. Anyway, it's all good. And that was all sorted. But it's something you need to be aware of, because if you are a person that thrives off the relationships and friendships and things like that, you are going to have a hard time traveling. And a lot of families we've met have had to go back because of that. Because it leads into the second thing, which is it really does expose weaknesses in relationships. Not only relationships between husband and wife or partners, but relationships between you and your children. And that's something that is very confronting when it happens. You got to remember that when you're traveling full time as a family, you are in each other's pockets 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, if you've never done that before with your significant other, you'll start to realize how annoying some of the things they do actually are. And the same with your children. Your children are going to be exposed to you more than they ever probably have been in their conscious life. And that's going to expose weaknesses in your relationships. We were very lucky, Paulie and I, that we had traveled full time before we had children. So we kind of knew each other's intricacies going in. But we have met one family specifically that ended up getting divorced because of traveling full time. Now, that's one out of thousands and thousands. So I wouldn't say if you have a relationship, it's going to break up because you're traveling. But we've met one family that the traveling caused the series of events that ended up them getting divorced. We've also met another family who have split up while they're traveling, but they just travel together now. So they're separated. They travel with their kids still, but they're separated and they live in different apartments when they go to a place, but they go to the same places. But the reason for that is when you're sitting there and you have no friends, like I was telling you before, in a foreign country with no one to lean on, you are going to spend all of your time with the people that you care about because there's nothing else to do really. And some people have just never been in that situation and don't know how it's going to affect them and their perception of their other partner. Those little things like your partner leaving dishes out were maybe not a big deal when you're at home and you had other things to worry about in life. But when you're traveling, a lot of times that's like your only worry in life is the fact that he left those dishes out or the fact that she left those dishes out. And that becomes a thing that drills into your head. Now, the way Paulie and I battle this is we talk about this a lot. And we talk about the things that upset us, the quirks, things like that, so that we keep the fires tempered. And then with the kids, I just make sure that I'm not too overbearing on them. And, flip side, if they're doing things that annoy me, I let them know. We just have open lines of communication. That leads me to the next thing that you need to be aware of, and I'm going to be brutally honest about. Traveling full time is way more stressful than the life you had at home. And there's going to be people that disagree with me, and it's probably not a one-size-fits-all approach. I'm sure there's people that are traveling that are escaping really bad situations and they're traveling because of that. They're probably having the time of their life. But for us, yes, obviously I've spoken about the reasons we left Australia. But it wasn't like our life was crazy bad, like we were domestic violence. Nothing was happening that we were escaping from except the cost of living. So when we started traveling, you introduce a whole bunch of stress because you've got to find places to live, you've got to find places to eat, you've got to find things to see and do. You go rock up to a place and the apartment is not what you wanted. So you're introducing a whole bunch of stress that you are not used to. So at home, the stress, you build a tolerance to the stresses you have because the stresses happen day in, day out all the time. When you're traveling, you're introduced to a whole bunch of new stimulus and all of that new stress, you've got to learn how to react to it. And we've had situations where we've arguably after the fact, it's been a really small situation, but one of us absolutely flown off the handle and it's just been something very small, like maybe missing a bus or something like that. But there's another bus coming in now. One of us will have an absolute meltdown. The best way I can explain it is it's like a constant boil of a kettle. You're constantly being boiled and your kettle's kind of bubbling and simmering away and then something will just cause it to pop off. That's what it's like. There's never really, especially if you're traveling fast and you're moving, maybe staying in a place for less than a month at a time, there's never really any time to unwind from that stress and remove that stress because you're always constantly trying to find food, you're always trying to constantly find accommodation, and you're always constantly dealing with foreign environments and all the intricacies that go with that. So the stress is a big one. And if you don't handle stress well, I'm sorry, traveling is not going to make that better. It's going to make that infinitely worse. The flip side of that is once you get a handle of that, it does make you very tolerant to stress. So if we go back to Australia, we're going to be calm as cucumbers. We've already talked about this. You know, we're not going to buy new furniture. We're just going to go with the flow. We're not going to let the little things worry us anymore because we've experienced stress at a level and a pace of new stress that most people don't experience in their life. The next thing I would say is that at some point you are going to get really, really homesick. And I'm not just talking about, oh, I feel like going home, to the point where you're potentially booking flights and getting there. And I'm not immune to that. I have a very high tolerance to being away from home. I joined the Navy when I was 17 and I've pretty much lived out of home since then. But even myself, as someone that has a very high tolerance to not really having a fixed address and being quite nomadic, had moments where I'm like, put my hands up, let's just go home. I miss home. Because your home is your home. It's the anchor point of your life. And this is the thing that makes me sad about the comments I get on YouTube. A lot of people think I hate Australia. I don't hate Australia. I love Australia. I don't like the government. I don't like the way it's being run, but I don't dislike the country. I love Australia. I love the beaches. I love the outdoor lifestyle. I love the safety and the rule of law. And you miss that because you go into environments that are so different. Southeast Asia, we're in Penang right now, and Southeast Asia is so different to Australia. It might as well be another planet. And you do get used to that, but we miss things like being able to go to the beach. We miss things like being able to have a barbecue in a park. We miss things like just being able to ride a scooter safely down the road without getting run over. It's things like that. And that going back to those stresses and the boiling, they boil up and that's where they accumulate. They accumulate into going, this is getting too hard. I'm missing home too much. Let's go home. Because the homesickness never really leaves you. You just dull it down by doing really cool things that you wouldn't be able to do at home. Pauline suffers a lot from this, my wife, because she has lived in the one place her entire life. And it's very difficult when your friends and family, you're on Facebook and you see the world moving without you. It's very hard to deal with that. Even though you're doing amazing things and they're probably looking at you going, oh, I want to leave Australia and go and do what they're doing. You're then going, well, I want to leave where I'm going to go back to Australia because it's familiar and I don't have to worry about the stresses of the little stresses that we're dealing with here, because most of it's because of stress. But it's also the homesickness and missing family and friends. So you need to be aware of that. And it will sneak up on you. And one day, if you don't acknowledge it and you don't unpack it with your partner and try and talk about the positives of what you're doing, next thing you'll be booking flights and you'll be home. The next thing I'm going to say will be very polarizing, but it's the truth. For better or worse, you're going to be spending more time than you wanted to with your kids. And I know that's absolutely terrible to say because there's people out there that would give anything to be able to spend as much time as we have with our children. And I would never change that. But there are days where I just wish they were at school because it would give us a bit of a break from them. And I know that sounds terrible now that I hear it back, but it's the truth. I wanted this to be a brutally honest review of traveling. You are with your kids 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with no reprieve. You can't just hand them off to your mother-in-law. You can't just hand them off to your uncle and go, hey, can you have the kids for 3 hours, or your sister? Can you have the 3 kids for 3 hours? We need to go off and do something. You have a responsibility to look after them. There's no date nights. There's no just sneaking off to the pub for a beer. There's no doing anything without them, which some people may love, but when you've been doing it for 3 years, there's times where you're just like, hey, I'd just love to be able to go on a date night with my wife and not have to take the kids. But to be able to do that, you've got to trust your children with someone that has their own children and is looking after their own kids. Yes, you can get babysitters and stuff, but you're in a foreign country. You don't know how it works. You don't know the rules. Little things like if they get hurt, what hospital do they go to? Where do they go? How do they get there? How do I get to the hospital? What is the rules and procedures? All little things like that. So yeah, I think homeschooling our kids has been fantastic and they've learned a lot, and spending as much time as we have has been absolutely amazing, with an asterisk next to it, is that there are just days where I'm like, hey, If I could just have 2 hours break from you guys, that would be absolutely amazing, just so I can either get more work done or whatever that ends up being. But you need to be aware that that will happen, because sometimes that can end up with you lashing out at your kids unintentionally. And that, I'm embarrassed to admit, that happens with me sometimes. Is sometimes the kids will cop it because I'm trying to get away from them, yet they won't leave me alone. But that's not their fault. They're kids. They don't understand that. I think that also goes for your partner as well. You know, I know there are days where Pauline just wishes she could just not be near me, right? And quite frankly, there are days where I wish that Pauline would just give me some space. That just doesn't happen when you travel, because you're a family unit. You might as well just be one person when you're traveling full time, because you're in a foreign country and you don't know anyone, you don't know the rules, you don't know anything. You have to stay as a unit. You can't break off and do your own things a lot of the time. Saying that, as you do get more comfortable with traveling, you do tend to peel off. I'll go to Muay Thai by myself. Pauline will go do boot camp classes by herself. But the kids are always with us, or one of us. So you never escape the kids. You kind of do escape your partners though. The final thing I'll say is that there will be times where you're questioning whether you're doing the right thing. And YouTube and TikTok reinforce that, because you get a lot of people that are like, you're ruining your kids by homeschooling them. You're ruining your kids by doing what you're doing. You know, they're not going to have any friends. They're going to be weird, awkward like world-schooled kids. So you're constantly questioning your own judgment as a parent traveling full time like this. And it's difficult. Now, I will say that the traveling community is very supportive. We're our own little counseling group like that, because we're all doing the same thing. But there are days where I question whether what we're doing is the right thing by our kids. Obviously, there are a lot of benefits of it, but people on TikTok bring up a good point. You know, they're missing out on friendships at school and things like that. They're missing, you know, we're constantly moving around. They have no stability. That plays on your mind. And there's nothing you can do to stop that playing on your mind, because there's constantly people reminding you of it on the internet. So you've got to have enough mental fortitude to be able to look through that and go, at the end of the day, they're my children and I decide what's good for them. And I honestly believe that if you have your children's best interests at heart, then they'll be fine. You know, we can justify it any way we want, the learning. There's plenty of ways to justify the traveling with the kids. But, you know, that's something that has affected a lot of people, because, you know, when your mother-in-law, say, for instance, we've met a family that's gone back to their home country because their mother-in-law was just in their ear constantly that they're not doing the right thing by their kids. And some people struggle with that. They really struggle because they respect that person, and that person's constantly telling them that. It's really hard. So with that in mind, don't let that dissuade you from doing this. Like I said, this has been one of the best experiences of our life. And I'm going to say our life because I know for a fact it's been one of the best experiences of our kids' lives, and my wife and I speak about this all the time. The fundamental question then becomes, would we do it again if we knew what we knew now about traveling? And the short answer is, hell yeah. I would do this again in a heartbeat. This would be something that I would recommend everyone do. If you've got the financial resources to be able to do it, obviously, and, you know, position to be able to do it. I would highly, highly recommend people do this, because it's been a profoundly life-changing experience for all of us. Just a little thing, like we have looked at going back, you know, when Buddy died, you know, it sort of rattled us a bit, you know, but we're not talking about buying new furniture anymore. We're talking about getting something within our means, because we're so used to living without stuff now. We're not going to end up with all the crap we had before, because we're just so used to appreciating the stuff we have. The boys, you know, like they're so different now after traveling, for better or worse, than they were before. The experiences we've had with our kids, no one will ever be able to take away from Pauline and I. And the kids, no one will be able to take those experiences they've had with us away from them. Because we've had some experiences that they may not appreciate until they're adults, But when they're out, they're going to be like, oh my God, we did some crazy things when we were kids. We hopefully have instilled in them that it's okay to take risks in life. It's okay to go with your judgment, and it's okay to live your life based on what makes you emotionally happy, not just on what makes you physically happy, like physical things making you happy. Because we sacrificed a lot to be able to do this. And I wouldn't say financially per se, but just, like we sold all our stuff when we left. If we held on to a house, we'd have a lot of money right now. We sacrificed to do this like everyone sacrifices to do anything. But hopefully we've shown our kids that it's okay to do that. And I will die knowing that I've really genuinely made an impact on my children. And you cannot pay me enough to not have that impact. Because there's a lot of parents out there that have no impact on their children, and basically the world around them and their friends at school and stuff is where they build their personality from. I can honestly say that I will have a legacy through my children because my children have spent enough time with me to know what I'm really about. And the same with my wife. And I will say that Pauline and I, notwithstanding something crazy, will be with each other forever. Because if we can make it through these 3 years of traveling together, there's going to be nothing that comes our way that's going to be harder than this last 3 years from a stress level. And it was all worth it. It honestly was. So if you're on the fence about traveling, I just wanted to set the expectations properly, because it's better to know this stuff's coming than to be blissfully unaware and then you end up having a catastrophic change in your mindset and going back prematurely. Stick it out. It's amazing. And I would encourage every single one of you to explore it, because it's been a profoundly life-changing thing for me and my family. And I'm sure it will be the same for you. So guys, I'm Jimmy, and consider subscribing. I'm going to be doing a lot more videos about this, reflecting on traveling specifically, and all the logistics that go with that, making money, things like that. But yeah, if you want to subscribe to a channel where you can learn a little bit more about these insights, also to ask some questions in the comments, I'll be happy to answer them and happy to give you some insights and thoughts. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I'm going to catch you in the next video.